Since the beginning of Clash Royale, we've had all sorts of currencies, from gold to gems to magic items to star points to banner tokens to elite wildcards. You get the point. Now, usually, this kind of stuff would be great. With different currencies in the game, it makes a lot of stuff more accessible to players, and if we only had one currency, it would create this massive divide between new players and seasoned players. But something that I've noticed in the past year or so is how broken Clash Royale's economy truly is, and with recent updates such as the April update, I can only see this getting worse. That's why in this video, I want to talk about how messed up the current Clash Royale economy is, and suggest some ways that the devs can fix the economy. I think the most inflated part of the game right now has to be gold. Gold used to be worth a lot, since in the earlier days of Clash Royale, the sources of gold were literally just chests. But nowadays, almost every part of the game gives gold as a reward. Let's name the main sources of gold in Clash Royale: Masteries, Lucky Drops, Clan Wars, special events such as Gold Rush, and more recently, the new events, which give gold now instead of season tokens. Now you're probably thinking, this is great, since there are so many sources of gold, which surely means it's easier for new players getting into the game to quickly max out. That logic would have worked out around 8 years ago. But in the current landscape of Clash Royale, cards are the issue, not gold. Obtaining cards in Clash Royale nowadays has become so difficult, since Clash Royale has nerfed so many features of the game that previously yielded cards you wanted. Lucky Drops, which used to give wild cards, now give random cards. The Season Shop, which used to give wild cards, was changed to give random cards, and then they completely removed it from the game. Chests used to be a guaranteed source of cards, but since they've removed them from the game, now it's become a gamble on whether or not you are going to get cards because of Lucky Drops. It seems that cards have become even harder to obtain than ever, and to be honest, it kind of feels like Clash Royale before the Magic update. The Magic update was a good update, because it overcame the issue of cards being the bottleneck in many players' progression. Before the update, there was a huge divide in lower level and higher level players. Higher level players would often have more cards maxed, because they could spend their money on the game, and because they had maxed their accounts, they could collect gold on overflow cards, allowing them to reach max level faster. However, for new players, both gold and cards were scarce, meaning that these players would have taken years to reach the same position as high level players if they didn't spend money on the game. I think that the value of gold has plummeted, and it feels like Clash Royale is just throwing more gold in our faces, when gold is not the thing that players need. Maybe more gold would help some players, but it's the way that Clash Royale is delivering these changes that's the issue. By nerfing and straight up replacing parts of the game that gave different resources with gold rewards is definitely not the way to go. Just to name a few, we had season tokens replaced with gold in events, and the Season Shop, which was the source of evolution shards, emotes, and other resources. We had gem rewards in Masteries replaced with gold, and the amount of gold we received wasn't even enough to compensate the value lost from losing gems. We had chests removed, which removes a major source of cards and gold. And with Clash Royale replacing more things with more gold, I can only see this issue creating an even bigger divide between new players and max players. Max players have too much gold and nothing to spend it on, while new players don't have enough gold and cards to progress to higher levels. The issue gets worse when we start to talk about level 15. Level 15 was advertised to be a no gold update.
Yeah, we're here to announce you how much gold it will cost to go to level 15 and...
No gold!
Now, this seemed pretty good, since they were appealing to people who had a lot of cards saved up, but no gold to level up the cards they wanted to level up. However, the fact that it takes 50,000 elite wildcards, which still hasn't in the slightest been tweaked despite other parts of the game getting nerfed, has created a massive divide in the player base. On one hand, the players who have lots of gold and wildcards can easily upgrade cards to level 15, because they can afford to spend 100,000 gold on 5,000 elite wildcards, as well as collect more and more elite wildcards due to their cards already being maxed. And before level 15, they were collecting so much gold because overflow cards would have been converted to gold. So these players have an advantage to max their accounts. And since these players get so much gold from playing the game normally, they instantly get back to max everything. Level 15 literally did nothing in terms of slowing down progression for already maxed players. They immediately reached back to where they were because of how easily accessible gold is. Now, what about the players sort of in between new and max level. I'm talking about the players who have around half of their collection to level 14. I am a long-term casual player, and I have around 1/3 of my collection to level 14, with around 1/10 of my collection to level 15. And nowadays, Clash Royale just feels like a slow grind. I have millions of gold, but I am bottlenecked by cards, since I don't have enough cards to level up cards to the next level and therefore spend gold. And elite wildcards are even more of a grind. Since I don't have a lot of cards to level 14, getting elite wildcards while playing the game normally is such a trek. The only place I can spend my gold and get closer to level 15 is spending 100k gold on 5,000 elite wildcards. But since that offer only appears once a week, I literally can only get a level 15 card every 10 weeks or so, which is absolutely horrible. And the problem is even worse for players who have barely any gold, cards, or resources such as gems and elite wildcards. Gold is something you gain fast from playing, but what about cards? Since wildcards have been basically removed from the game now with how rare they are, leveling up cards to competitive levels is so difficult if you don't play the game seriously. Getting to level 15 for a player who starts playing in the current landscape of Clash Royale is genuinely almost impossible if they're free to play. How can these players ever collect elite wildcards if cards are the bottleneck? Meanwhile, there are some players who have tons of cards to level, but not enough gold. So these players are just stuck where they are without any meaningful progression. And it doesn't help that the best source of cards, gold and wild shards, which was the season shop, literally got removed as well. It sucks because level 15 provides a real advantage in game, especially if you want to play competitively. And even in casual play nowadays, level 15 is something that provides such an advantage in games that it could be the reason that a certain player gets to a higher arena. So the fact that there is a massive divide in the player base is kind of depressing. I think that if Clash Royale made level 15 cost gold instead of introducing a new currency, it would have turned out a little bit better than it is now. I think we can all agree that gold and level 15 are some of the most unbalanced things in the game right now. Gold and elite wildcards have become useless for players at the top, but such a meaningful resource for players just starting out. But evolutions takes the cake for me in terms of inflation. It's clear that evolutions have become a huge part of the game, and I think they are really fun if they are balanced. However, evolutions are definitely not balanced, and I'm not even talking about the actual gameplay of evolutions. I'm talking about the massive divide in the player base when it comes to obtaining evolutions. In Clash Royale, we have an evolution released every month, and usually the newly released evolution is pretty strong. Now this would be pretty fair for all players if evolutions were easy for free-to-play players to use, but the thing is, free-to-play players only get a max of 2 evolution shards per season, and you need 6 evo shards to get a single evolution. Again, this wasn't super bad, because the season shop could compensate up to 3 random evolution shards of an evolution that Clash Royale already nerfed into the ground. But now that the season shop is removed, I truly don't see how this can ever be recovered. The big problem I think that comes with only getting 2 evolution shards per season, on top of the fact that evolutions are changed so often, is that you kind of get stuck in the cycle of putting some shards in one evolution, and then later deciding that you want to put shards in another evolution, and the cycle continues. This leaves you with basically no evolutions, since all your shards get distributed through different evolutions. Currently, I have so many shards distributed through so many different evolutions because of this, and it sucks because every time I decide to commit to an evolution, a new one comes out with an even more broken ability than the last, and I change my mind. But the situation is still kind of weird even for players who buy the pass every season, which contains the newest evolution. This is because these players who end up getting the evolution linked to the pass royale just end up stacking their normal evo shards, since these are also a part of the game's progression. However, the issue isn't as pronounced as it is for free-to-play players, since it can be slowed down if a player skips pass royales instead of buying them every season. I don't think many of you would have expected that I would include cosmetics as being an inflated part of the game, but I think cosmetic items such as battle banners and star levels are one of the most inflated parts of the game at the moment. First of all, star levels have been completely abandoned by Clash Royale, which means players end up collecting millions of star points and don't know what to do with them. Players just getting into the game struggle to collect star points, meanwhile players at the top wish they could have a way to spend star points as they max it out. The issue that arises with this disparity is that if Clash Royale were to make a genuine way to spend star points on resources, such as gems or evolution shards, it would be so unfair for players with less cards maxed, since the players that collect millions of star points can easily spend them on these without breaking the bank, since star levels have been something that just overflow nowadays. I think that star levels are just a doomed feature in Clash Royale, and the only way Supercell can recover this is if they make more cosmetic features for cards, such as new card profile icons or more star levels. Before banner tokens got removed from Clash Royale, Royale, banners were also a pretty inflated part of the game, since it was so difficult for some players to get a hold of battle banners, since the sources of banner tokens were so limited, while others had no way to spend their excess banner tokens, because max players could get higher tier mastery rewards. I think that since it has been removed, it completely voids the inflation caused by banner tokens. Now, I know this might be pretty controversial, so before you dislike the video, hear me out. The original Pass Royale with the Book of Books and the Magic Coin is a major contributing factor to the inflation of Clash Royale, and I know that Supercell knows it. In fact, even the Lucky Drop Pass before the April update was pretty good value, which is why Clash Royale had to nerf it. I think that keeping the Pass Royale balanced is an essential aspect of the game to prevent inflation. The reason that I think the 2022 Pass Royale caused this is because of how much more overpowered the paid pass was compared to the free pass. Since it cost only $5 US, it was almost a no-brainer for players to buy it, since it gave so much more resources than the free pass. Now, the issue is that if so many players were consistently buying the Pass Royale, then they would have been leveling up their accounts way too fast, especially since the combination of the Book of Books and the Magic Coin could easily get a champion to level 14 for free if you used it correctly, which, keep in mind, is something that would have been almost impossible for a free-to-play player. And the other resources in the paid pass would help these players level up parts of their account and collect so many resources, such as gold, gems, and wildcards. The free pass was still pretty good, but the paid pass trampled over it in terms of value. The huge difference in progression in plays simply came down to whether or not a player bought the paid pass. If you didn't buy the paid pass, you would still progress your account pretty fast, but you wouldn't have even been close to the level of players who paid $5 for the pass every season. Since the Pass Royale got nerfed, all the players that previously paid for the old pass had no reason to spend on the new pass, but the damage had already been done. All of these players had inflated accounts, because they basically maxed their account and maxed out on gold, as well as gems, since they didn't need to spend gems while playing the game anymore. I think the situation is so difficult for Clash Royale here, and to be honest, I know that deep down, Clash Royale knows that the $5 2022 Pass Royale is one of the biggest mistakes they've ever made. If Clash Royale increases the price or nerfs the Pass Royale like they did when they released level 15 in 2023, then they know that there will be backlash and players will complain that they are taking away resources, even though they're trying to balance the game.
Introduce the Diamond Pass that's like triple the price of the Gold Pass. Technically, it's more value, but it's actually a little bit less for progression because there's no Book of Books. There's not even regular books, so you can't even obtain these anymore unless you buy the special offers, which rarely even show up. They barely sell the Book of Books. They hate it. It was like the biggest mistake ever.
However, if Clash Royale left the $5 paid pass even till today, I think that the game's economy would be worse, since the gap between pay to win and free to play would have been so wide that it wouldn't have even been worth it for a free to play player to still play. And the thing is, I knew that the Pass Royale 3.0, which was the Lucky Drop Pass before the recent nerf, was overpowered, so Clash Royale was just doing damage control. I mean, even from the free pass, I got 2 5-star Lucky Drops per season, which is pretty insane considering that it gives a similar tier of rewards to the paid pass. So there was no reason to even buy the paid pass unless you wanted the new cosmetics and the new evolution. The smaller the gap between the paid and the free pass, the more balanced the game is. But if the free pass is too good, then Clash Royale won't make enough money. I think the only solution here for Clash Royale is to make the free pass good enough for free-to-play players, but not make the paid pass too overpowered where it inflates the game. I think that Clash Royale is currently in a position of no return, since the old Pass Royale has already done the damage. So, is there a way to improve? Honestly, I think yes. Clash Royale can definitely overcome the inflation problem of gold and evolutions. However, things like level 15 and overall game balance can never be solved, and Clash Royale can only try to mitigate damage that the old pass has caused. If Clash Royale were to allow players to buy limited cosmetics for millions of gold, I think this would give players a way to spend gold as well as enjoy the game again, since they can try to get back to max gold. However, this would just be a temporary solution. Since gold is so accessible nowadays, they would quickly get back to max gold. Another possible solution would be to let players buy evolved shards or gems with gold. An example might be to buy an evolved shard with 3 million gold. This would not only overcome the issue of gold being inflated, but also make evolutions accessible to players who don't buy the paid pass. I think that buying gems with gold might also be a little bit tricky to balance, since nowadays in Clash Royale, there isn't really many good ways to spend gems other than global tournaments, emotes, and chests in the shop. Overall, I think this situation is really difficult for Clash Royale, and I think they are in a lose-lose situation. I really want this game to be fixed, and before Clash Royale fixes their updates, I think it's super important that they fix the economy, since this would just make future updates more worth it for the entire player base. I hope you enjoyed this video though. Thanks for watching.